I'd like to welcome Sarah Banks from banksbusinesssolutions.com to interview you today. Sarah's very kindly agreed to discuss with us GDPR, what we need to know, its implications, and how we get it done. Good morning, Sarah.
Morning. Thank you for having me, David. It's lovely to be here.
No, thank you. I think this is just it should be a very simple process, but it's actually fairly complicated. It's not a one-size-fits-all thing that businesses need. And of course, GDPR compliance is a legal requirement now. Perhaps we could actually start off, perhaps you could explain exactly what is GDPR?
Yeah, so GDPR stands for General Data Protection Regulation. And this was brought in by the EU back in 2016 in order to protect the data of anybody that's giving their information to a business. So it doesn't affect you on a personal level, but it's businesses. And data could be anything from an email address right through to somebody's medical history, their race, their political views, all these sorts of things that are information on a living citizen are classed as data and are covered by GDPR. And it came in the EU, as said, in 2016. So a lot of people didn't know that it was actually law then, but it only became enforceable in May 2018. And that was the deadline that lots of people focused on and had to be ready for. And later on, I know we'll talk about how Brexit has affected this, because I'm sure a lot of people at this point are going, well, it was an EU regulation. The UK, if they're watching from the UK, aren't part of the EU anymore. The issue is that Brexit covers EU citizens, regardless of where the business is based. So GDPR covers all businesses that have any form of contact with any EU citizen. And in the UK, we have what's called the Data Protection Regulations 2018, which basically mirror GDPR for UK citizens. That's probably really complicated and confused everybody now.
No, that's a very, very good explanation, actually. Yeah, no, it's good. I think we need that to actually clarify it all, because it is a confusing aspect. So every business which is collecting any piece of data, even someone subscribing to an email newsletter, has to have a GDPR, and would you call it a GDPR statement or a form? What would it be, and where would they put it?
So any business has to be compliant with GDPR. So it isn't just about having a statement, it's about being compliant in the way that you handle that information. Even someone sending an email to your business and you opening it, you have processed that person's data because you've opened the email and seen their email address. And if you're processing data of any form, you have to be compliant. Now, to be compliant, there's a few things that you need to do. You have to have a privacy policy. Generally, they will be displayed on your website. But if you don't have a website, you need to have a privacy policy that you can give to people at the point at which you collect their information. You need to, connected to it, have a cookie policy if you've got a website. Now, cookie policies get a bit more complicated because they're also part of what's called the Privacy and Electronic Communication Regulations, which are to do with how data is used for marketing purposes. So you need a cookie policy as well. You need to have policies within your organisation on how you handle data. You need to be certain that all the systems you're using are compliant for GDPR. So, for example, if your emails go through Office 365, you need to make sure that you're using the right version of Office 365 to be compliant. And I know that for a lot of sole traders working from home, they're perhaps using the home version of Office 365, which isn't actually compliant for GDPR. You need to have the business version. Similarly with the operating system on your laptop, if you're using the personal version of Windows, that won't be compliant. You need to be using the professional version. So there's lots of things like this that you need to understand. It isn't just a case of getting a policy in place. So you need to go through a process of understanding what data you collect within your business and where you store that data, and whether or not where you store it is compliant for GDPR. And when you know that, you can then complete your privacy policy.
Gosh, that's hugely complicating. I mean, who? It's unbelievable to think that a basic Windows operating system would not be compliant. It's bizarre. Absolutely one of those bizarre Euro rules. I should imagine. Does it apply to Apple as well? Of Apple users, are they compliant on a normal operating system?
Yes, so the Apple operating system is, because Apple is kind of set up more for professional. The main reason that Windows isn't compliant is in an operating system is because it can't be encrypted with the home version. And encryption is really, really important. Because if you were to lose your laptop or your phone or your tablet or whatever devices you're using, then that would class as a data breach. And you would therefore have to report that to the regulator, which in the UK is the Information Commissioner's Office. And they would then decide whether you had taken the necessary steps to be compliant with GDPR. Now, if your device is encrypted, there is no way that anyone's getting any of that data off it, and therefore you will be deemed to have complied with GDPR. If it isn't, they're going to look at this in a bit more detail and decide whether you did all you could to comply or not. And at that point, that's where they then could enforce the GDPR fine because you didn't comply and you've put people's data at risk.
Okay, so just clarifying that, it's quite an interesting point you bring up, because I'm an Apple user, and if someone stole my laptop or I lost it, I do have a password to actually access the screen, but say someone actually got into my screen, then obviously they could actually access all of my data, all the information on my computer. So in what way is that different than encryption?
So I've seen tech people do this, and I'm not a techie person, so this is kind of my kind of rough way of describing it is tech people with just a password on your computer can get into it in 3 minutes.
Yeah.
They plug in a little device that works out your password and they're in. If it's encrypted, what it does is it scrambles the information. So they might be able to crack your password, but once they get in, the device recognizes something that it's not you or someone's trying to get into it. And basically, nobody can access that data.
Oh, really?
The way the encryption keys work, yeah, and they're so complicated, it could take millions of years to actually get into it. And so that's a kind of, I'm sure there's probably some tech people watching this going, that's a really rubbish explanation, but that's kind of the simple way that I understand it.
So basically, an Apple Mac would know if someone was trying to hack into it by using a system to bypass your screen password lock.
As long as you've got your encryption turned on, yes.
Oh wow, that's amazing. That's a fantastic bit of information to know. Actually, that's good.
Yeah.
Oh, I think
so
that's really useful.
Yeah, I've almost locked myself out of my MacBook because I've had caps lock on. And I've put my password in and I've gone, why isn't it letting me in? And then eventually I get in, and obviously I know my encryption code. If I was to get completely locked out,
right, I
have the key to get back in. But if somebody else was doing it, they would just be completely locked out and wouldn't be able to get in.
You know what? I'm not sure if I've got encryption turned on or not. So as soon as we finish this interview, that's the first thing I'm going to go and investigate, and I'm going to turn it on and make a note of my encryption key, but not make a note of it in the actual laptop, but probably on a bit of paper somewhere that's safe. I think in my
lock
office.
Up your piece of paper. Yeah, it will take a little bit of time to do it, to turn it on. Just be aware that it does take several hours for the encryption to go through, so it's best to do it overnight.
Okay, brilliant. That's a very, very good tip. Thank you. So it sounds as though it's very complicated. Drawing up your GDPR policy, is that something generally people can do by themselves, or to actually do it so it's a legal document as such? Does it need to go to a third party to have it done properly to stand up to scrutiny?
I would advise everybody to get some form of advice through either someone that professionally is qualified and knows what they're doing in GDPR, or go to a lawyer. However, the Information Commissioner's Office does have a template on their website that you can download, but you need to understand the data that you have in your business, why you have that data and what you're doing with it in order to be able to fill that in. And this is where it's hugely time consuming. And there's an awful lot to understand if you don't know what you're doing. You know, you need to know what the difference is between personal data and special category data. What's the difference between a data controller and a data processor? What is the lawful basis for you to process data? And there's 6 of those. And if you're not sure about all of this and you haven't got time to spend hours reading it all on the ICO website or the GDPR regulations, it's easier to get somebody in to help and support you that knows what they're doing.
Absolutely. I mean, the amount of time one could spend on creating that GDPR policy, it sounds like that a whole day. If you spend that whole day just on your marketing or sales, you'd actually generate enough business to pay someone else to do it all and save your brain space in trying to figure it all out.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is why people like me and others are there to help and support people, because it's a lot easier for them to outsource this rather than doing it themselves.
And I think we've heard of sort of some big corporations having been prosecuted for data breaches. Is it happening to smaller businesses as well?
As of yet, there haven't been any prosecutions of smaller businesses. There's lots of rumours around as to how this is going to be policed in the future and how people will check it out. The key risk to a small business is if they're using a big system such as Google, and Google has a breach, they then have to deal with that breach themselves and would have to report it because potentially their data has been breached. And if they weren't set up properly in the first place, the ICO are going to come in and have a look at what they could have done better. And at that point, the ICO will make a judgment as to whether you should be fined because you did nothing, or whether you've done enough that they think giving you advice and support will be enough.
And how often should a business look at their GDPR to update it?
At least annually, because you may bring in new systems, you may change your processes, you may change the data that you collect. It would be better practice, I think, to do it every 3 to 6 months, because then you're going to pick up things as you change them. But you also need to look at key changes that affect GDPR as well. So one of these is Brexit. Obviously, we've now left the EU. So we become what's known as a third-party processor now for EU data, which sounds a little bit complicated. It basically means that whilst we were part of the EU, any data we process on EU citizens is just processed as it normally would be under GDPR. Now that we've left the EU have to decide if in the UK we're okay to continue processing data on EU citizens. Now that decision is going to be made at some point between the 30th of April 2021 and the 30th of June 2021. We don't yet have a date and we don't yet know what the decision is going to be. So at least up until the 30th of April, we carry on as normal. But every business really this year should be looking at things after that date and what effect the decision of the EU has made on whether or not they can continue to process data in the same way.
Okay, so there's a lot more to think about there, obviously. It's
Yeah.
You really put GDPR would be quite a simple thing to have, wouldn't you? A cookie cutter process, really, but it's hugely time consuming and complicated, far more so than I admit I wasn't aware of how much it was. And I've still got to do it for my my website business questions. We're at the beginning of that. We've got the consent on other websites, but yeah, no, but not as much detail as I actually need. So I'm actually probably not particularly compliant at the moment. So a lot to work on. What mistakes do you generally find with companies who've tried to do their own GDPR forms? Where are they going wrong?
So the key things that people miss out is they miss out maybe a system that they're using. They don't think about their internal processes and who they're sharing data with. So quite often you'll find that people have got an outsourced team of some form. Even as far as someone doing their website maintenance will have access to data within their business, and they haven't considered that as someone they're sharing information with. People not really fully understanding what it all means. So they go out and they copy someone else's policy, put it on their website, and it's completely irrelevant to their business and doesn't show what they're doing in their business. So they feel they've done it, but they haven't actually understood the data in their business.
Right.
And then there's also the misunderstanding of different types of data and the additional protections that are needed for special category data, which is things like health, race, religion, political views, things like that, which come into special category data, need extra protection. And there are certain systems that you really shouldn't be using if you're collecting that sort of data because they're not adequate enough. So it's these sorts of things that people generally don't understand. And finally, it's the lawful basis for collecting data. Lots of people think that because somebody has given them their email address, maybe as part of an inquiry, that they are then legally allowed to do what they like with it, but they're not. If that person wasn't told at the point they gave them that information that they were then going to be added to a marketing list or a text message list or something like that, and they then contact them through it, then they can't do that lawfully. And that needs to be in their policy and really clear to people at the point that they provide the information.
So in terms of that, that means contacting them outside of the context of their original email.
Yes.
Obviously, you're allowed to reply to the person who emails you.
Yeah, of course you can reply to somebody that emails you, but if you then contact them in another way, so say somebody inquired to your business, I don't know, said, I'm interested in purchasing a handbag from your business, and they inquired about that and you sent them information on it and they went ahead and purchased, that's great. If you then put them on a mailing list and send them information on purchasing mugs, that's not really okay because they were interested in handbags and they've purchased a handbag, but there's no indication there that they're interested in mugs. And therefore you're not actually complying with the rules at that point.
Yeah, makes complete sense. Is there anything else that people should know about GDPR?
Just that it's important to do. A lot of people think, oh, they'll never find me, it's never going to be an issue, it's too complicated. I think that it's important that you do it because A, it gives people trust in your organisation, the fact that you can show that you've done it and you've complied in every way possible. It protects you as a business owner because the last thing you want is to have the ICO on your doorstep wanting to go through everything you've done, in some form of investigation. And it's it is a legal requirement, so we should all be trying to comply with the law as far as possible.
Absolutely. I'm sure you've encouraged lots of people to actually get the GDPR statement. The consequences, obviously, not having one can be severe potentially. How can you help people, Sarah? Where do people come to speak to you?
So I support people through what's called the data audit process. So we start off with a call, usually video or a phone call, where I've got lots and lots of questions that I ask to go through and fully understand what you're doing with data in your business. I then go away and write a report for you and look at what you next need to do. Then I can pull together all of the background paperwork that's going to sit behind your policy, or you can do that yourself. And I then work in partnership with a company called Coffee Clutch, who are legally trained to provide the actual policy. But you need the information from the data audit to put into the policy that they provide.
Okay, fantastic. And what is your website? So I know I mentioned it earlier on, but we might as well say it again.
It's banksbusinesssolutions.co.uk.
Fantastic. Everyone, get yourself to Sarah's website, have a conversation with her. She does a lot more in addition to GDPR, from helping you with setting up a mailing list, to sales funnels, to getting your WordPress website off the ground. Really, Sarah's a virtual assistant. You can save a lot of time by outsourcing the mundane tasks or things you're not particularly technically capable of doing to Sarah, and actually focus on what you love doing, which is actually working on your business and selling your product. Sarah, thank you very, very much for your time today. It's been really enlightening, and I'm sure people have gained a great deal of knowledge from this. Thank you.